In the year 1502, Cesare Borgia sat across from a man who wanted something from him. A diplomat, a negotiator who believed he had prepared for every possible outcome. The man had rehearsed his speech for weeks. His logic was sharp. His leverage was real. He walked into the meeting convinced he would leave with exactly what he came for. Borgia, however, said almost nothing. He did not argue. He did not counteroffer. He simply watched. The silence began to stretch. The diplomat, brilliant and articulate, started speaking faster. He filled every pause. He clarified points that needed no clarification. He offered concessions that had never been requested. By the time the meeting ended, he had given away more than he intended to negotiate, and Borgia had barely moved. That diplomat later wrote about the encounter. His name was Niccolò Machiavelli, and what he absorbed in that room permanently altered how he understood power. There is a force stronger than persuasion, more alluring than charm, and more destructive than threat. Yet most people do the exact opposite of it every single day. There are 5 psychological mechanisms that create this kind of magnetic authority. The final one binds all the others together, and almost no one talks about it. Once you understand it, the way you see relationships, negotiations, and daily interactions will change. There is a principle that governs nearly every human exchange. Yet few people live by it. The one who needs less controls more. It is not the wealthiest person. It is not the one with the best argument or the highest status. It is the one who can sit at the table and remain unattached to the result. That person shifts the balance without saying a word. Robert Cialdini demonstrated this through his research on scarcity. He found that the perceived value of anything, whether a product, an opportunity, or even a person, rises the moment it becomes less accessible. What most people overlook is that scarcity does not apply only to objects. It applies to you, your time, your approval, your emotional availability. When you chase someone, when you always initiate contact, when you repeatedly explain your worth, when you ask for reassurance after every disagreement, you oversupply yourself. You make your presence common, and what becomes common becomes easy to discard. History offers the same lesson. In the courts of Renaissance Italy, survival did not belong to the most talented advisors. It belonged to those who understood distance as leverage. They did not crowd the prince. They positioned themselves far enough away that the prince had to seek them out. They understood a simple truth: constant availability erodes value. There was a courtier in the court of Ludovico Sforza, a capable musician and strategist, who made one critical mistake. He was always present. Every banquet, every council, every hunt. He volunteered for every assignment. He praised every decision. Over time, he blended into the background. His reliability turned into invisibility. The difference was not talent. It was restraint. Within 2 years, Sforza could no longer remember his name. He had faded into the background, reduced to decoration. Meanwhile, another man, far less gifted, followed a different strategy. He appeared only when called upon. He spoke only when the room had reached an impasse. He left before anyone grew tired of him. Sforza became intrigued, then fascinated. Private meetings followed. Land was granted. The distinction was not talent. It was dosage. You do not become indispensable by increasing output. You become indispensable by making your presence scarce. What feels rare feels valuable. And this principle operates everywhere. In romance, the partner who slightly withdraws after offering warmth often creates a powerful longing in the other person, not through games, but through rhythm, tension, release, tension again. That pulse is the core of attraction. In business, the consultant who calmly says, "I'm not certain I'm the right fit for this," will often secure the contract faster than the one who sends 14 follow-up messages. The first has communicated something instinctive and powerful. I do not depend on this outcome. That message, even when unspoken, is deeply compelling. Mark Manson refers to this as non-neediness. He argues it is the most essential trait in any social interaction. Not confidence, not charisma, non-neediness. Confidence can be imitated. Charisma can be performed. But the absence of desperation cannot be convincingly faked for long. It comes from a place of internal fullness rather than emptiness, and people sense the difference immediately. So ask yourself honestly, what are you chasing right now? Whose validation are you pursuing so intensely that you have forgotten how it feels to stand firm on your own ground? That subtle, leaning forward, that silent plea for approval, is often the very force pushing your desires further away. Stop reaching. Notice what begins to move toward you. There is another layer to this dynamic. Power often hides inside incompleteness. Unfinished paintings sometimes command higher bids than polished ones. A song that ends before the final chorus can linger longer in the mind than one that resolves perfectly. A half smile can unsettle more than a broad grin. The mind is wired to close loops. When something remains partially revealed, unresolved, or ambiguous, the brain keeps circling back to it. It tries to finish the pattern. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. Machiavelli grasped this long before the term existed. Cesare Borgia rarely exposed his full strategy to anyone. Not to his generals, not to his father, not even to his closest confidants. Each person received only a fragment, just enough to act, never enough to see the entire design. The result was profound. Those around him felt perpetually close to understanding him, yet never fully there. And that distance, the gap between what people know about you and what they suspect, is where influence lives. Most individuals sabotage themselves by doing the opposite. They overshare. They narrate every plan. They explain their reasoning before it is requested. In doing so, they remove the tension that creates intrigue and authority. Many people believe that complete transparency automatically creates trust. And in certain situations, it does. But within the realm of power and attraction, total transparency can become surrender. The moment you reveal all your plans, your emotions, and your fears, you hand someone a blueprint of your inner world. They see where your treasure lies. They see where your defenses are weakest. Whether they ever use that knowledge against you is irrelevant. The mystery that once made you compelling is gone. Robert Greene explores this idea in The Art of Seduction. He argues that mystery sits at the core of attraction. Not beauty, not wealth, not intelligence. Mystery. Beauty fades. Wealth can be rivaled. Intelligence can be challenged. But a person who cannot be fully decoded, fully categorized, or neatly understood holds a lasting place in the minds of others. Think about the individuals who captivated you most. Were they the ones who revealed everything during the first conversation? Or were they the ones who left pieces missing? The ones who made a statement that lingered? Who smiled at an unexpected moment? Who remained silent when everyone else rushed to speak? You were drawn not to clarity, but to the gap. This is where many people go wrong. They confuse mystery with deception. Mystery is not dishonesty. It is restraint. It is the conscious choice of what to share and what to withhold. It is the discipline of ending the chapter before the final page, compelling the reader to continue. A person who loudly declares his power is easily forgotten. A person who says little yet commands attention leaves a mark. The mind encounters something it cannot fully resolve, and unresolved tension breeds fixation. In practice, this is simple. The next time someone asks what you have been working on, resist the urge to explain everything. Offer a fragment instead, a hint without a full outline. Something that has been occupying my mind lately. I will share more when the time is right. That brief response often generates more intrigue than a long explanation ever could. It invites curiosity. It creates anticipation. It gives others a reason to return. This is not concealment. It is curation. And curation is a language of authority. Consider another principle. In the animal world, there is a behavior known as appeasement signaling. When a weaker animal faces a dominant one, it lowers its body, drops its head, exposes its stomach. Without words, it communicates submission and a plea for safety. Humans display a similar pattern, only verbally. Sorry to bother you. I know you are busy, but I completely understand if this is inconvenient. Just following up again. Each of these phrases is the verbal equivalent of turning belly up. Every one of those phrases sends the same underlying message: you are above me. And I hope you are generous enough to lower yourself. What makes this tragic is that it often works in the short term. If you grovel long enough, people may toss you a small reward. They might answer your fifth follow-up. They may grant you a diluted version of what you requested just to silence you. But respect never follows. They may respond to you, but they will not regard you as an equal. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, was born into slavery. He possessed no wealth, no rank, no formal power. Yet the most influential men in Rome sought his guidance. Why? Because he never asked them for anything. He never placed himself beneath them, not from pride, but from inner sufficiency, even as a former slave. His presence communicated something unmistakable. Everything I require exists within this mind. You are free to engage with me or walk away, but I will not shift my axis to secure your approval. That level of self-containment carried more weight than the riches of senators. Machiavelli noticed the same pattern among rulers. The princes who endured were not the ones pleading for alliances or sending frantic letters. They did not offer concessions before they were demanded. Those who begged were conquered first, because begging conveys one message above all others: I cannot function without you. The moment someone believes you cannot survive without them, the balance of power is gone. There is a story of a Venetian merchant in the 15th century negotiating access to an Ottoman trade route. The agreement meant everything to him. His fortune depended on it. Yet instead of rushing forward in desperation, he sent a brief note: I will be traveling through your waters next spring. If a discussion aligns with your interests, I am open to it. He did not request. He did not plead. He did not even confirm that he desired the arrangement. He framed his presence as the opportunity. Within a week, the Ottomans agreed to meet. Contrast that with another merchant, wealthier and better connected, who had sent 3 separate delegations the year before. Each one sounded more urgent. Each one offered increasingly generous terms. All were ignored, not because the proposal lacked value, but because desperation announces itself. It signals that you are the one in need of rescue. When you beg, you are not merely asking. You are advertising your deficiency. You are declaring to the world that you are incomplete without this outcome. And the world, operating by its own laws, often withholds precisely what you crave. This is not cruelty. It is dynamic tension. Desperation pushes away. Self-sufficiency draws in. The pull of someone who does not need is difficult to resist. Which leads to the real question: how do you stop begging when the need feels real? You begin by altering the internal frame. You do not need their approval. You may appreciate it, but you do not depend on it. You do not need the job. You are deciding whether it is worthy of your time and energy. You do not need the relationship. You are determining whether this person deserves a place in your life. The adjustment seems small, almost invisible, yet its impact is profound. The moment you stop operating from need, you stop draining your own authority. And when that leakage ends, people begin to sense a weight in you they cannot quite define. They might label it confidence. They might call it charisma. But it is simpler than either of those. It is the stance of someone who no longer asks the world for permission to exist. There is another principle at work here: the power of calculated friction. Making yourself too easy to access often makes you expendable. In 1959, researchers Elliot Aronson and Judson Mills conducted an experiment that revealed something counterintuitive. They divided volunteers into 2 groups seeking entry into the same organization. One group completed a simple process: fill out a form, attend a meeting. Done. The other group endured awkward tasks, strict screening, and repeated rejection. Both groups ended up in the same place, with the same people and the same experience. Yet those who struggled for admission valued the group far more. Their effort intensified their attachment. This phenomenon is known as the effort justification effect, and it shapes more of your life than you realize. When you make yourself instantly available, when you answer every call immediately, agree before the request is finished, or reorganize your entire schedule for someone who would never do the same for you, You remove the friction that generates value. You turn yourself into something free of cost. And free things are often overlooked, taken for granted, or replaced without hesitation. Machiavelli observed this dynamic in Florentine politics. Leaders who granted constant access, who opened their doors to anyone at any time, gradually lost authority. Unlimited access diluted their influence. In contrast, rulers who required a gesture of loyalty, a favor, or some demonstration of commitment before granting an audience commanded deeper respect, not because they were morally superior, but because they understood a fundamental truth: people rarely cherish what costs them nothing. This principle applies with precision to personal relationships. Think about the friend who is always available, who never declines an invitation, who rearranges everything at a moment's notice. You may care about them deeply, but do you truly respect them in the same way you respect the person whose time feels limited, the one who is harder to reach, whose presence feels intentional, whose attention feels earned? When they finally sit down with you, it feels significant. Be honest with yourself. There is a story about a tailor in Milan during the 16th century. He was not the most technically gifted craftsman in the city. At least 3 others were known for finer stitching and more intricate detail. Yet his waiting list stretched 6 months into the future. The reason was simple: he refused to hurry. He declined clients who demanded speed. He once informed a duke that his commission would wait behind that of a merchant, because the merchant had shown patience. The reputation that spread was not centered on superior craftsmanship. It revolved around his standards. Soon, nobles across Lombardy competed to wear his garments, not because the cloth was extraordinary, but because being dressed by him signaled that you had qualified. The resistance was part of the appeal. The barrier itself became the product. You must design a similar structure into your own life, not through manipulation, not by playing games, but through authentic standards. Stop being endlessly accessible, not to appear distant, but because your time has real value and should be treated accordingly. Stop accepting every invitation, not to project importance, but because declining what is misaligned is the only way to commit fully to what matters. When someone asks for your time, your assistance, or your focus, they should sense the significance of that request, not because you create artificial difficulty, but because your life is organized with intention, and deviation carries consequence. This is not ego. It is design. The person who gives indiscriminately may be kind. The person who gives deliberately is powerful. The distinction is not compassion. It is clarity. Cialdini's principle of scarcity supports this everywhere. Limited releases sell out quickly. Exclusive memberships flourish. Restaurants with long waiting lists attract national attention. The pattern is consistent. Friction communicates worth. Effortless access communicates replaceability. Your attention is the most precious asset you possess, more valuable than money. Because money can return. An hour of undivided focus from someone grounded and purposeful cannot be reclaimed once spent. Treat it accordingly. When you begin to operate this way, the dynamic shifts. People stop assuming your availability. They begin valuing your presence. The pursuit reverses. You are no longer the one chasing. You are the one being sought. And once that reversal stabilizes, it rarely flips back. Now we arrive at the final mechanism, the one mentioned at the beginning, the element that binds the previous principles together. Without it, everything discussed so far becomes technique, surface behavior, a performance that collapses under pressure. The foundation is this: you must become someone who does not imitate power, but embodies it internally. And that internal possession arises from a single source that few are willing to examine. Self-betrayal is not powerful because it is absent. It becomes powerful when it is confronted. Every time you agreed while your instincts were screaming no. Every time you forced a laugh at a joke that diminished you. Every time you remained in a room, a relationship, a job, or a friendship that was quietly draining you because walking away felt more painful than making yourself smaller. Each of those moments did more than disturb your peace. They weakened your presence. They cracked something essential inside you, the silent certainty that you can rely on yourself. And without that self-trust, Every strategy turns into desperation, dressed in sharper clothing. You can attempt to practice scarcity, but if you secretly believe you are not worth waiting for, your body will expose you. Your gaze will shift. Your tone will tremble. You will rush to justify the silence you created, and the structure collapses. You can attempt to cultivate mystery, but if what you are hiding is not strategic restraint but shame, if you believe that being fully seen would cause abandonment, then your mystery is not influence. It is confinement. You can refuse to beg, but if that refusal is sustained by tension, by clenched teeth and rigid posture, others will detect it. Strain is simply desperation standing upright. Machiavelli wrote, "The prince, while in exile, he had lost his position, endured torture, and been discarded by the political world he once served. Yet instead of composing pleas for restoration, he created a work that would outlast every rival who had sidelined him. That was not a tactic. It was identity. He did not simulate authority. He reconstructed himself internally until his strength was structural, embedded, inseparable from who he was. It was no longer a pose. It was foundation. This echoes what Epictetus meant when he said that no person is free unless he masters himself. Not others, not appearances. Himself. The individual who has faced his own contradictions, who has stopped fleeing from past compromises, who has looked directly at a history of self-betrayal and decided it ends here, that individual no longer needs to perform. The environment adjusts to him, not because he forces it, but because authenticity at that depth generates a pull that imitation cannot reproduce. Robert Greene describes something similar in his discussion of compulsive behavior. He suggests that people operate from deep, unconscious patterns that repeat across every area of life. The man who pleads for validation in romance will do the same in business. The woman who abandons her standards for approval at work will mirror that pattern at home until the internal fracture is repaired. The pattern continues. The pattern is the person, and until you confront that pattern, no method will rescue you. So here is the difficult part. You must examine your own betrayals, not the ways others failed you. Those are easy to list. The moments you failed yourself, the times you knew you should have left but remained, the situations where you shrank so someone else could feel larger, the promises you made to yourself and quietly broke before the day had even begun. Write them down if necessary, not as punishment, but for clarity, because once you recognize the pattern, you gain the power to interrupt it. And once you interrupt it, you stop emitting the subtle signal that tells the world you are uncertain of your own value. That signal is invisible, unspoken, yet constant. It is the reason techniques collapse for most people. They project strength outwardly while broadcasting doubt beneath the surface. And at a subconscious level, people always detect what lies underneath the performance. When you stop betraying yourself, when you begin honoring your standards even when it costs you comfort, something shifts that goes beyond explanation. It feels almost transformative. Your voice changes, not louder, but steadier. Your eyes settle, not hardened, but assured. Your presence occupies space differently, not forcefully, but naturally. Others will begin describing you in ways that surprise you. There is something different about him. I cannot explain it, but I trust him. They are not reacting to new techniques. They are responding to what you have stopped doing. You have stopped apologizing for existing. You have stopped performing a version of yourself crafted for someone else's ease. You have stopped bargaining with your own boundaries. And in that cessation, in that quiet refusal to bend further, you become something people are drawn to yet struggle to define. You become whole, not flawless, not untouchable, not distant, whole. A person whose inner world aligns with their outer expression. A person who does not require external validation for what they already know internally. That is the fifth mechanism, and it is the only one that truly matters. Without it, you are imitating mystery. With it, you embody it. Borgia did not study a manual on influence before sitting with Machiavelli. He did not rehearse silence as a tactic. He entered that room and acted from a place of internal certainty. At the deepest level, He had already decided he did not need the diplomat's approval. That is the difference between strategy and identity. Strategies are adopted. Identity is constructed. And once constructed, it does not require constant effort. It simply exists. Now you have the full structure scarcity that grows from genuine fullness rather than artificial absence. Mystery-rooted friction created by authentic standards rather than manipulation. And beneath all of it lies the foundation, the quiet, uncomfortable work of ending the internal conflict you have carried for years. Understanding this structure is one thing. Living from it is something else entirely. Here is the final thought to sit with. The version of you who no longer begs, no longer chases, no longer performs, already exists. You have felt him in brief moments. In the rare instant when you said no and meant it. When you walked away from something familiar because you knew it was slowly draining you. When you sat alone in silence and realized that the quiet was not emptiness, but enough. That version is not someone you must construct. He is someone you must stop suppressing. So ask yourself the question that lingers after everything else fades. What are you still performing, and who are you performing it for? If something in this struck deeper than surface interest, if it felt like recognition, understand that what has been shared here is only a portion. There are dimensions to this conversation that cannot be unfolded publicly. Certain strategies and psychological frameworks do not survive open platforms. The mechanisms that genuinely shift how others respond to you often live beyond what is safe to broadcast. Most people will scroll past. That is part of the filter. But if what you felt was not curiosity, but clarity, then you already know whether you are ready to step further.